Okay, seems like we have more in attendance. So let's go ahead and get started. And also, thank you all for coming in today. So, of course, tonight's webinar is going to be focused on what courses should my student be taking. Because as our students are now in the thick of things as far as their first semester and almost to the home stretch before they get a bit of a break during the upcoming Thanksgiving period, but also even more so during winter break, we should really be thinking about what courses are going to set them up for success while also balancing out the academic areas that they're most interested in, and also making sure that we're trying to keep a handle on a strong GPA and a really impressive transcript. So that's going to be a large focus of what we are discussing tonight. Again, for those who are still joining, please utilize the chat box for any questions that you may have. And I'll also try my best to leave a bit of time at the end for any questions that may come up, as well towards expanding on things that we're discussing tonight or any more specific case studies that you all may have. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, again, let me introduce myself. My name is Justin Clarke. I'm not only a full-time college counselor at Galin, but I'm also the associate director of college counseling team. So I manage all of our part-time and full-time staff here. I have over 12 years of experience working with students in the college application process. And a lot of that started by me being assistant director of undergraduate admissions at my alma mater, Northwestern University. While I was at Northwestern, I owned all of our Northeast territory where I recruited, reviewed, and admitted roughly about 10% of our incoming class on any given year. As a graduate of Northwestern, my particular academic focus was in political science. And even though we're a bit up and down in terms of our athletics on any given year, I'm still a really proud alumni and I bleed purple. So I'm excited to bring my expertise and my knowledge to you all tonight. And hopefully I make things a little bit easier as you're trying to figure out what classes your students are going to be taking in the upcoming academic year. But first, our agenda. So today we're going to be breaking down things in terms of an initial introduction into what colleges are actually looking for and what they actually care about in terms of the academic development of students as they're moving on from ninth grade all the way to their 12th grade year once they finally start submitting applications. We're going to set the table in regards to the current climate as far as things that you should be aware of. We're, of course, going to go over how to balance rigor as far as more challenging courses that your students going to be taking year in and year out, but also their performance in the classroom as it manifests via their GPA and the grades that they're receiving. Also going to dive into the electives because as colleges get more and more competitive, of course, they want to see students who are strong in their core academic areas, but they also like a little bit of specialization when available towards classes that align with their anticipated major. And then we're going to get into some of the toughest academic programs, which are directed admits. And they definitely come with their own set of nuance. So we're going to make sure we cover all of these in good time. I'm not going to keep you all too long away from dinner, but also want to make sure that I'm giving you a pretty succinct overview of just the things that you should be aware of and also that you should be thinking about as we head into this upcoming period of course selection. But first, let me give you a little bit of an insight in regards to how colleges are actually looking at your student's profile, both inside and outside the classroom. As you can see, this is a recent breakdown from a lot of input from a varied amount of universities, really centering in on the top 100 private, public, flagship universities, small liberal arts. We got a lot of feedback from these particular universities, and it was asked, what are you actually looking for students, and what has the most impact on you making an admission-based decision on an applicant? And as you can see, and it's quite in line with the focus of tonight's webinar, grades are still, to this day, the most impactful element of what gets students into the colleges of their dreams. Whether it's their high school grades and their college prep courses, which are also known as your core academic courses as well, whether it's the overarching grades that they've gotten in all the courses that they've taken, how rigorous their courses are, or otherwise known as the strength of their high school curriculum. And then as we move on from those academic elements, we start to get to things that are more so manifested via the type of clubs that they're involved in or their writing samples. But again, the big three are going to be their grades in their core academic areas, the total grades across their academic core classes and also their elective courses, and then making sure that they've actually been challenging themselves with the strength of their high school curriculum. And they love to see that manifested in progressively being challenged from ninth grade all the way to 12th when they're actually going to be applying. So these are three big things to keep in mind as we move forward. But let me dive into a little bit more as far as what do I mean when I'm thinking of core versus non-core or elective-based courses, and also how that relates to any specialized programs that students may be engaged in. So first, when we're thinking about these core versus non-core courses, those are a bit more straightforward. Your core courses are going to be your academic foundations. So your mathematics courses, your lab-based sciences, your history or social science-based courses as well, of course, English. And then to round out the core, colleges do love to see our students pursuing a secondary world language with no preference whether it's going to be French or German or Mandarin, for example. But those five key areas really do make up the core. And they want students to have that solid foundation because whether you are going to a public flagship university like University of Wisconsin-Madison, whether you're going to a private university like Long Water and Northwestern, or whether you're going to end up maybe on the East Coast at one of the prestigious small arts universities, every single college or university wants students who are strong foundationally, academically across the board. So even if you're going to be applying as an engineering major, we all know that college brings a wealth of opportunities, and also students tend to change their major quite often. If you end up in the communications major, they still want to make sure that, again, you can handle the STEM-based courses and you can handle your humanities courses as well. And that's why that strong focus is being put on your core courses. Now, for the non-core courses, those can be anything from taking an art-based course. Those can be anything from a required government course, maybe from a semester. It can be a course that's really focused on construction management, and all of these different non-core courses, or you'll also hear me refer to those as electives tonight. Any of these elective-based courses are going to differ from high school to high school. So your high school may have a wealth, a plethora of different courses that you can take outside of the standard academic focuses. Another high school may not have as many options. But, and again, I'll dive into this a little bit deeper further in our presentation. You want to make sure that you have a balance between the core courses that you're covering every single year. And also, again, if you have the opportunity to take non-core, more elective focus courses, you're also taking those and having them start to give a little bit of focus towards what you think your major might be in college. So that's going to be the main difference you hear between our core academic courses and then also our non-core or elective-based courses. Now, for specialized programs, those really manifest themselves in terms of the classes that students are going to be taking and the programs that they're a part of. When you're looking at anything from maybe a dual enrollment courses, a lot of students, if they are ahead of the curve, whether it's, in their mathematics most often or their science-based lab courses, they may have to take, an advanced level course starting their junior year at a nearby four-year university or nearby community courses. And those would really fall into that overarching umbrella of your dual enrollment courses, which is a great example of specialized programs. I've encountered throughout my career other specialized programs that maybe have a bit more of a professional focus, where, again, students who have been able to really knock out their core or their graduation requirement courses in high school start having a built-in internship, maybe during the second half of their high school career. Regardless of what your particular high school offers in terms of the specialized programs, these type of programs can be really advantageous to not only boost up the academic profile of your student and make them the most competitive that they possibly can be by the time that they're applying to their colleges and universities, but also to give them a little bit more range in their academic exposure and oftentimes give them some hands-on learning opportunities, which are not only great for the academic and the intellectual maturity of our students as they're preparing for college, but also they look really impressive on a college application because they give the students the opportunity to actually live out the future major that they're interested in and possibly the future professional career path that they're interested in as well. So again, if your high school does have, whether it's a small amount of specialized programs or a wide array of specialized programs, really start talking with your student about getting involved in those because again, It's a win-win on both sides, whether you're thinking of building up your application or helping them mature a little bit quicker and prepare for life after high school. In terms of rigor and performance, this is often the trickiest conversations that I have with a lot of students and also with a lot of families in regards to, well, we keep on seeing the acceptance rates drop at universities that were not as competitive, years ago when maybe I or you as parents were applying to college. And it almost seems like everything you're hearing, whether it's from the admission offices, whether it's from the data that you're looking at when a new class is enrolled at a college, or even in news articles, points to students are almost having to be perfect robots to get accepted into college these days. And first, I want to say, please let me dispel that myth. Universities still are not expecting students to be perfect in any way, shape, or form. And they just want to see them progressively challenging themselves while also still at least having a mix of A and Bs throughout their high school career. And that really is what gets to the heart of this balance between the course rigor that your student is taking and also the performance that you're seeing as far as the grades on their transcript. Balance is key. And I'll say that with all the truth of if you are anticipating or hoping for your student to apply to universities that are considered selective, which is traditionally accepting 50% or less of students that apply to them, or even some of the most competitive universities, the highly selective universities, which are traditionally students accepting 20% or less of their applicants. Balance is key. And balance is key when projecting out, okay, if my school offers APs, I probably want to take at least maybe 75% of the available APs by my senior year if I want to apply to an MIT or University of Pennsylvania, for example. But you also have to balance that out with how strong is my student in regards to specific academic areas. They might be a rock star STEM students and absolutely amazing in their AP bio course and their AP calc course, for example. But they may just hate the reading that's involved with their English based courses and aren't going to be able to maintain maybe a straight A or an A heavy transcript if they also bump up the rigor of the courses that they're taking in an area that they're not quite as strong in or really excited about, to be honest with you. So it's better to really start those discussions as soon as you can and be realistic with yourself as the family unit, but also be realistic with yourself as far as a student being in the driver's seat towards, I want to make sure that I'm progressively challenging myself, but I'm also challenging myself within means and within my ability academically to make sure that I have at least a mix of A and Bs on my transcript. But best case scenario, a very A heavy transcript that is able to showcase that I'm a rock star in the classroom at my specific level and I'm not digging a hole by trying to challenge myself too much. And then I start, experiencing difficulties as far as getting C's and belows in some of my courses. So that's the best advice I can give when it comes to having that conversation about balance and also how you should start to forecast out the academic balance for your student, depending on the type of universities that they're interested in. Now, one of the biggest things as we're kind of jumping off of this notion of balance is how you should think about your class progressions, particularly your math sequencing. For a lot of universities, and these are both for selective, these are both for highly selective, even just looking overall towards some of the top 100 universities ranking wise, which are the most popular for our students usually. The math sequence is the most scrutinized and really one of the most important sequences that students have that they often fall short of if they're not getting some good guidance from ninth grade onward. We at least want to see our students at the level of a pre-calc, but preferably calc in terms of their math sequences by the time that they're applying in the first semester of their senior year. And of course, before that, that would be your standard Algebra 1, Algebra 2 courses, and then go on to your pre-calc and your calculus. Of course, there's going to be different levels based on the high school that you're coming from, whether you can also bump up the rigor of those courses at an honors, an advanced, an AP, or even an IB level. But I would say again, you want to keep a particular eye on your math sequencing because that is one of the courses and one of the specific academic areas that year in and year out, when you're on our side of the desk at a college university or you're an independent counselor like myself, the data continues to show that your math sequence and how high and progressive, I should say, in your math sequences really does paint a stronger picture of the type of student that you're going to be in college, particularly when you're looking at your first year freshman success. So, again, while you want to keep a close eye on the progress of all of your core academic areas, you want to particularly have a focus on how well your student is doing in their mathematics based courses, because usually those are the courses once they get to campus on college that give them the hardest time and are going to really be a make or break in terms of how strong their freshman year GPA is. So again, remember, think about the balance. You want to progressively challenge your student while also staying within their means and their abilities that they're showcasing on a year in and year out basis. You also want to think about and forecast out how they're going to be progressing in their courses across their core academic classes, their electives, but most importantly, their math sequence. And you want to try and get that conversation happening as soon as you can, both with your home team in terms of their academic advisors, their college counselors, depending on who they are within their own high school, but also by working with professionals like myself who have been on the other side of the desk, who have reviewed thousands upon thousands of applications and know exactly what admissions officer is going to be looking for when we're looking at the academics of their application. So that's, a pretty good guidance when it comes to how to balance out the rigor and their own performance throughout high school. And this is some recent information that really points towards how important that balance is, how important your progression is throughout your courses, and expanding that out from just the individual focus of your student to more so a national landscape on how more and more students are starting to do incredibly well in their courses by the time that they are entering college as a freshman. And while I won't point to every single course that's highlighted here, we can use Calc BC, for example. As you're looking at this data and you're looking at this information, this is a breakdown on the number of students who were entering college, so freshman year, with at least a score of 4 or 5 on each of these relative AP tests. And again, as we know, APs, they're not perfect, but they're one of the few metrics and one of the few standards academically, in addition to the ACT and the SAT, that we can use to kind of level set for our students, regardless if they're coming from a small school in DC, a very big public school in Texas. And the AP test is going to be the AP test. So again, it gives universities and their admission officers kind of a good range to see just how well you've learned and really mastered and are able to apply the materials that you're learning in all of your courses, regardless of high school. So again, using Calc BC as an example, if we go back at roughly a decade or so, a little bit more, back to 2014, there were roughly about 780, particularly in the Calc BC pool of students that at least got a 4 or 5 on their test. Not a number to slouch at, but as we can see, we've gone from 780 in 2014 to just a little bit over 1,000, specifically 1,083 in 2023. That's a big growth. And that shows that as better resources are becoming available, perhaps as our students are progressively getting sharper and sharper year in and year out, that the competition is becoming even tougher to stand out from in regards to what may have been more impressive in 2014 to get a 4 or 5 in this Calc BC course, or I should say the test, excuse me, now is still impressive, but you have a lot more students who are raising the bar of competition because it's not quite as rare as it might be. And you kind of see pretty much the same type of trends, whether you're looking again at this Calc BC, whether you're looking at the English language AP test, 2014, 1,097 students. By 2023, 1,790 students. Things are getting progressively more competitive. So I use this to point to and really not scare you all in terms of how competitive things are becoming now, but more so to again point to the importance of being able to forecast out, where you want your student to be as far as the classes that they're taking year in and year out throughout their high school development. Also, making sure that they are balancing challenging themselves as far as increasing their rigor every single year with doing well on their coursework. And again, for students that do have the opportunity to take AP courses, making sure that they are really focusing in on learning all the course material that's being taught throughout the standard academic year and really making sure that they have the support to knock it out the park when it comes to showcase that what they've learned, I should say, towards the AP test, because it really helps out when they're doing well on these type of tests. And again, it makes it a little bit more realistic for them to be accepted to a selective or a highly selective caliber of university or college. Now, let's flip the script just a bit and talk about our classes that are usually a little bit more creative and aren't just locked in as much as our core classes. Those are going to be the focus on filling out your elective based courses and also any courses that just aren't a part of your course. Whether those might fall into a category of more specialized humanity based courses, whether those are courses in business, maybe an intro to macro or microeconomics or statistics based course. A lot of high schools will offer for our budding engineers either something as simple as just an intro to CAD and design, or something a little bit more in depth, focus on mechanical engineering for students that definitely know that's the major I'm interested in. I want to see what that actually looks like in the classroom before I step foot on campus. There's a lot of different areas that these can fall into, but the best thing about them is that, again, they add a little bit of uniqueness. They add a little bit of focus from an applicant standpoint academically as well to students that have these courses available and that are taking advantage of them. And they allow students to start becoming, I don't want to say experts, but they allow students to start gaining a level of expertise in the academic areas that directly connect to the type of majors that they want to apply to by the time they get to senior year. So the best of both worlds is being able to, again, focus on your core academic areas, make sure that your student is doing well with those. If you have elective slash non-core courses, having a discussion with your student towards, hey, you're really strong in your science and your math-based courses. I see that next year, as you're heading to 11th grade, there's some really interesting engineering courses that are available. Maybe we should sign up for one of those. Just see how it goes. Because oftentimes in a lot of high schools, your student is going to have a period to either add, drop, or swap their courses. And it gives them at least a good opportunity to get exposed to, an elective based course, which directly connects to their future majors and figure out, even if they hate it, it still answers that question of, oh, well, actually engineering isn't for me. I love my math based courses, but I think I'm more interested in business. Let me switch into stats or let me give this economics course, a try. It's exposure via these courses, but again, it also gives them a little bit of uniqueness when it comes to their academic profile as well, which is a win-win for our students. So start having those conversations. These programs that are direct admit are oftentimes some of the most interesting to think about preparing our students for academically, and also understanding how your high school academics directly relates into your competitiveness for a range of direct admit programs. Some of the direct admit programs that are going to be seen the most often traditionally lie in very competitive engineering schools, whether we're looking at a Carnegie Mellon, for example, whether we're looking at an MIT, Colorado School of Mines. Those are some that come to mind. And also business. Some of the biggest ones, whether you're looking in the Midwest at a WashU, their Olin School of Business, a school that consistently makes students fall in love with themselves, as an example, would be Michigan's Ross School of Business. Or if your student has incredibly high hopes, they might also be looking at UPenn's Wharton School of Business. Again, engineering and your business schools are going to be some of the most popular and easily known by students as they're making their way throughout high school. But also, would be remiss if I didn't talk to our students who are a little bit more artistically inclined, whether that's a performance-based music program. Berkeley is one that comes to mind, or at my alma mater, the Venus School of Music. Whether that's a more arts focus, whether they are in the medium of painting, drawing, for example, or for some schools, maybe architecture has some overlap with their arts-based programs. But for any of these direct admit programs, it's important to start to get a sense as early as you can in your student's high school journey where they may be leaning, especially if it's going to be towards one of these more competitive majors, or if it's at a competitive program, competitive direct admit opportunities for them. And that's where a lot of a combination of being strong in their core academic area, their core academic classes they're taking in high school that relates to a direct admit program they're interested in, as well as balancing out that strength in their core with any electives that you can possibly take that start to showcase students gaining experience in the classroom, a bit of budding expertise in their academic area that they're most passionate about. And it also shows the admission officers by the time they're applying that they've gone above and beyond. They've gone that extra yard to not only do really well in their calc course or do really well in their history course or do really well, in their intro to business course, but they're also taking courses that are a little bit more specific that many students their age probably don't care about, but they have a direct passion that's linked to it. And they're trying to put themselves in the shoes of a future college student that is majoring in this particular area, as well as possibly, depending on the class, getting a little bit of insight into what are some of the topics or what are some of the experiences that they'll have or their professional pathway that's also connected to their major. So again, when it comes to these direct admit programs, you want to make sure that your student is strong in their core areas because that's the foundation of any college experience. And also, if they have any availability to take elective or non-core based courses that tie into engineering or business or to music or art, that they're starting to take those and they're progressively challenging themselves via their class rigor in those elective and non-core areas as well. Because with direct admit programs being oftentimes more competitive than being accepted to the universities that they exist in, you want to give yourself as much of an edge as you possibly can so that you're prepared, you're competitive, and you're putting yourself in the best position for success moving forward from ninth grade onward. Because it's a long high school journey. You want to make sure you're starting to build those academic foundations as early as you possibly can. So again, I promised that I wouldn't hold you all too long, and I wanted to make sure that we had some time for Q&A. But if there's any questions that you all have, whether because you dropped them in our chat or our Q&A panel, please definitely ask them now. And I'll also start to take a look at any questions that are being added in the chat, and I'll answer those to the entirety of everybody that's in attendance. So let's take a quick look. So one question I have, which is honestly great, is towards high schools that offer youth apprenticeship programs, which are a blend of academic enrichment, but also are a blend of pre-professional training as well. But one of, I don't want to say a disadvantage, but one of the unique features of these apprenticeship programs is that they often take time out of school hours to participate in, which is kind of tough for students and also families to figure out if it's worthwhile prioritizing. The question towards this is it better to stick to more traditional classes? And I'm guessing by traditional classes, they mean core classes in school and get a good GPA and just a standard strong curriculum. Thank you for asking this question because it's one that comes up a lot with families that I work with and a lot of families that we do have at Galin as well. It, I say this not to sidestep your question, but I say this for my answer to start off with towards it depends on the student and depends on the program. A lot of these programs are absolutely amazing, especially for students that need a bit more exposure in life to figure out not only their major, but how that major actually manifests itself into life after college. So for students like that, as long as they are taking care of business in their core academic areas, they're progressively challenging themselves. And especially if they have high hopes in terms of attending a selective or a highly selective university by the time they graduate, you want to make sure that their rigor and their GPAs are both strong in the core academic areas. And they also have good work life balance, I'll describe it as, to be able to handle the work that they're going to have to do through their standard courses and also prioritize showing up and doing an amazing job in their apprenticeship based program. And that pathway is not going to be for every student. And if your student, you feel like whether it's because of their organizational skills or you think they may have a little bit more, room to mature before they're able to handle balancing both of those worlds, it's still perfectly fine and they still can find success at selective and highly selective institutions If they just stick to traditional classes and they're getting a good GPA and they're progressively challenging themselves via a strong curriculum, you can still find success there. So it more so really is going to take from a parent standpoint, because you know your kids better than anyone, being able to look at how they're doing, being able to look at how they're managing their time and saying, I think you can handle this. And I think you would actually grow a lot from this experience because a lot of these youth apprenticeship programs also build out their extracurricular profile, which is another added advantage you can have. But if it takes away from, again, won't go back, but the chart that we were talking about earlier in terms of the big three most impactful elements of an application for university that they're looking at, all center around your academics. If the student can't handle balancing out that time management, stick to traditional classes, get a great GPA, and also progressively challenge yourself via the curriculum. That's the advice I would give. Okay. Let me see if we have any other questions. Here we have one. It's towards how do schools view PLTW classes? So classes that are not AP, but they are still rigorously selective, I should say. It's a really good question because again, while I was at Northwestern, even since then, a fair amount of the schools I recruited at were ranged. They would be some of the bigger public schools that had a great academic curriculum, whether it was AP based or IP based. I once had a school that was a Montessori style. They did not use grades. So that was even interesting to be able to see and also review in terms of whether students were getting accepted. I say this to say that I've pretty much seen it all at this point. Now, and particularly when you're looking at these PLTW classes that aren't officially AP, but they're still rigorous and they're still challenging our students, our scholars, the thing that's going to be your best friend is the school profile. The school profile is updated every single year at every single high school, regardless of where you're at. And it gives a very concise overview of the school in a nutshell, both in terms of their academics, what type of curriculum they're on, what's the average GPA overall. Sometimes they may go as far as average grades that are received for students, class by class by class. And also, it gives an amazing look into the nuances and the specifics of any school curriculum that may have classes such as these and don't offer APs for a specific reason. A great example is prior to joining Galin, I was actually a college counselor at the Latin School in Chicago. Smaller, we usually had about 120 students in our senior year graduating class and didn't offer APs, really didn't offer a lot of APs outside of STEM. And the reason why we did that, both overall, but especially in the areas of the humanities and histories, was that as unifying and great of kind of a level setter of our AP courses, which lead to AP tests, they also really constrain teachers in what they can teach and how they can teach. So some schools, again, my former school at the Latin School of Chicago is a great example of this, don't offer the APs, but will have their own version of higher level coursework, whether they're officially named at the honors level or the advanced level, or they don't have any of those signifiers being attached to them. But within the school community, you know, if you're taking insert class, it is really rigorous and you are a rock star in the classroom if you're able to do well in those. Regardless of what your school may be or the context of your specific institution, that school profile is going to be able to give that context to the admission officers, whether they are a 15-year vet or whether they're first year out of their master's based program and they're still learning the nuances of your high school and maybe of the region that they're reading for. So I would say that's what's going to come into specifically when they're looking at that PLTW classes. I would say still find a balance with those as well. You know, if it comes into an aspect of you have whether these specific courses or any courses that are non-AP, but you also have APs, 9 times out of 10, I will say it's sometimes safer to maybe take an AP because that's universally known. And again, it usually follows a stricter guideline on how the courses are taught. And the AP courses that your students are taking, they're designed, of course, to enrich them academically, but they also do a really good job when they're taught correctly of reflecting the type of subject matter, questions, and experience that your student may have as they go on to take the corresponding AP class. So hopefully that answered your question. But thank you for asking that. That's actually great for everyone to hear. Any other questions? Okay, so we have another question here. Okay, this is actually a great question. So the question that was sent was towards for a student entering their 11th grade year and planning to take some more APs. How do we balance out, or really what's the best route to move forward with in terms of you could take more APs, but doing so will require you to postpone or get kind of creative with some non-core required classes, whether that's a physical education, maybe an arts requirement, financial literacy, for example. And which is the better pathway to move forward? Just go ahead and take those classes, but don't take the additional APs, or get a bit creative and put in those AP courses, but either push back those required courses or have to get creative? Really good question, because this is something we talk a lot about with our students. And at Galin, of course, it depends on the students, but overall, for a selective or a highly selective type of outlook, it's always better to take, more APs. It's going to raise your GPA. It's going to look more impressive to colleges and universities. And for those classes, whether it is a physical education or an arts or even a financial literacy, for example, I find that 9 times out of 10, a lot of our high schools understand students that want to take more rigorous courses because of the type of colleges that they're interested in. And they'll allow you to do that either in person during summer school or even online over a shorter amount of time during the summer. And that's actually really, really helpful. So, as you're making that decision, the very first piece of advice I'll give you, in addition to that hierarchy advice I just said, speak to your support system on the high school side, whether it is your academic advisor, whether it is your counseling team from a college side, and see what are your potential pathways moving forward. You first want to verify that, hey, if I do want to put all of my eggs in the basket of a higher number of APs than I would normally take, do I have it locked in? Will I definitely be able to take this required phys ed or arts or financial literacy course over the summer? Will it be in person? Will it be online? You want to get a sense of what's actually going to be the reality of the pivot, if you choose to pivot and push back or take any of these courses during the summer, before, again, you put all of your eggs in the basket of the increased number of APs. Because again, the more APs is definitely going to look great on a transcript, especially if you're keeping your grades high. But you also don't want to just choose that pathway and then run into a last minute headache because your senior is, in their first semester and they now have to get really creative with their schedule because they forgot about this phys ed course or this arts course, which is required for them to graduate, regardless of how amazing of a rock star they are in their AP courses. So that's the guidance I would honestly give. But thank you for asking that. That's a great question. Any other questions? You all have been asking some really good ones this evening. Or it's very possible that I've answered any possible questions you have throughout this presentation. Or it's also equally possible that everyone is tired. They're ready to log off and get to dinner and hopefully get some sleep before they head to work tomorrow. Both of those are equal possibilities, but I'll give maybe another minute or so just to see if anyone else thinks of a question that they've been biting at the bit to ask before we wrap up this evening. Okay. In case there's any other questions, I will say that I am going to drop my direct email into the chat. And I will say that any questions you all may have, whether it's about what classes we possibly should be taking, or even thinking of how to balance out the classes my student is engaged in with also building out their extracurricular profile. I'm going to be a great resource and would love to talk to all of you, whether it's via email. You can also schedule a consultation with me directly if you're interested in college counseling services. Because the great thing about my team, in addition to being some amazing professionals, is that we've all been on that other side of the desk. We've gone through travel season, recruiting students, talking to a lot of different students who are interested in a wealth of different possibilities at our respective universities. We've guided students in and out of the classroom. We know what universities are looking for. And also, we have that direct experience of being able to help you find that balance, whether it is the balance of how much should my student be challenged so that they are growing each year, but they're not getting bad grades, which can honestly be hard to overcome. Once you get to 12th grade and you're applying to these colleges, whether it's AP versus youth apprenticeship programs, whether how flexible we can get with outside courses, and if those are going to be advantageous to take. Really, anything, underneath the moon, I will say, of questions that you have. Our team is ready to support you, make your lives a whole lot easier, and also take kind of a lot of the question marks and destigmatize a lot of what it takes to be competitive at universities in today's current landscape and climate, and make it a lot easier for you all to reach that type of level of preparation. So again, if you all have any additional questions, if you all are interested in setting up a consultation as well to talk about what offerings and services we have from a college counseling perspective, please reach out to my email, which I've dropped in the chat. But I will say with that, I will wrap us up for the evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that I answered a fair amount of your questions. I hope that you got a fair amount of support and had questions answered just generally from the information that I covered tonight. And again, don't hesitate to reach out. But I will wrap us up for the evening. Everyone, take care. Have a good dinner as well, and have a good rest of your week, especially as we head into the Thanksgiving break next week as well. Take care, everyone.